So while we're waiting for the screen to come down, I just love that we're following on from Lisa's presentation. It's just so perfect because we do take supply chains for granted. It's definitely one of those topics where if something is happening and it's all perfect, then it's exactly as it should be. That's the minimum. But if something goes wrong, then all chaos breaks loose. And so with supply chains, I'm sure we've all seen the headlines about the supply chain snarls, from the container ship delays to the factory shutdowns to the inventory glut that is facing a lot of brands and retailers in the lead up to Christmas. And when BoF Insights published our report on building value and resiliency in fashion supply chain, we identified that nearly 80% of the Q4 2021 earnings calls actually featured the phrase supply chain, and that was an increase of over 40% versus 2020. So supply chains, it goes without saying, highly complex, sprawling, opaque, and top of mind like never before. So welcome, Sriram. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I wanted to turn it over to you to be able to help us understand, this global audience, what exactly is ShopRunner, what is its place in this value chain, and what are the supply chain problems that it's intending on resolving?
Thank you, Diana. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there. Lovely to join all of you today. FedEx, as being one of the largest global shippers, has a significant role to play in e-commerce in terms of delivering to consumers' houses. And over the years, we've always thought about how do we move up the value chain in e-commerce and help brands become more competitive on their direct-to-consumer channels. Of course, there's significant investment, commitment, and time brands are putting together and building their products, but as the pandemic proved, and just before the pandemic, it's becoming increasingly difficult to separate shipping and shopping when it comes to a consumer defining their experience working with a brand. That's when we acquired ShopRunner, and ShopRunner is a platform which has millions of consumers. And our intent and our strategy is to connect these consumers to their favorite brands on the ShopRunner platform. But the idea is to make the pre-shipping or the pre-purchase, purchase, and the post-purchase experience as seamless as we possibly can. And as the speakers have mentioned, and the point that you made, Diana, the really critical part of making shopping easy is supply chain. And the cost of supply chain, which is becoming increasingly prohibitive for brands to compete today. How can we bring all the intelligence and insights that we have developed over 50 years of running one of the largest physical networks on the face of the planet and be able to provide these insights to brands and connect these consumers to the brands as well, and play a role all the way from demand generation to post-purchase experience and make it delightful for a consumer to operate and consume what the consumer channel of brands. That's the mission of ShopRunner, and that's where the synergy between FedEx and ShopRunner comes to play.
Perfect, thank you. And a little lesson for our audience today. So Amazon Prime kicked off in 2005, and it really transformed the retail industry when it introduced that concept of unlimited two-day shopping. But Sriram, in terms of those consumer demands, those are escalating and they're increasing. So how do the brands and retailers really keep pace with this kind of escalation?
That's a consumer expectations of being able to receive their products as quickly as they possibly can from the moment of placing the order to receiving it is placing a lot of strain on the cost of supply chain that brands have to incur consistently. But having said that, the discussion or the presentation that we just heard before, there's significant opportunity to optimize. I'll answer this question in two dimensions. The first dimension is there's significant opportunity to optimize supply chain for brands, to optimize their supply chain all the way from where they procure their goods, where it's manufactured, where it's stored, how it's distributed in the last mile. If you really think about the FedEx network, we move anywhere between 15 to 80 million shipments a day and much more during peak. And the amount of data and insights that we have on where is this wastage in distribution? How do you change the distribution channels? How do you position inventory closest to where the demand is and where the consumers are? And how can we add this intelligence and insight to brands for them to be able to consume in helping optimize their supply chain is one of our ambitions by building out the ShopRunner FedEx Dataworks platform. We have a lot of capabilities that we're building, leveraging all this data that we're sitting on through machine learning, AI, that we want to expose to brands who are working on these platforms to be able to help them optimize their supply chain to meet the consumer demand. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is environmental accountability. When we place an order and we want to receive that T-shirt in 2 days, what's the footprint that we're leaving on this environment that we live in, and this beautiful earth that we are a part of? The most important thing that's missing today is very clear information on carbon emissions and the impact of the order that you place on the environment. So the second way we're addressing it is, as FedEx Dataworks, we built out this sustainability insights engine that at a package level, at a lane level, at a distribution center to consumer level, is not only able to produce historical view of what exactly was the impact on the environment, but it's also a predictive engine where brands can actually expose to customers on their direct-to-consumer channel the impact of the choices that they make on speed of shipping. So I do want to address both. Yes, there is a real consumer need, the need to be able to get whatever they order in their hands as quickly as possible, and leveraging FedEx's insights and intelligence on supply chain distribution to be able to achieve a certain SLA, whether it's same day, next day, 2 day, 3 day. What is the most optimal distribution system to put in place, whether it's drop shipping or it's last mile? How do we help brands compete at the right cost to be able to meet that consumer demand? And two, how can we start to create visibility around the impact of the choices that we make? Fortunately or unfortunately, today that data is post-fact, not immediate. And that's one of our ambitions as well, and that's one of the capabilities that we're building out in this FedEx ShopRunner platform to be able to expose to brands.
Thank you. And that makes a lot of sense about how those heightened customer expectations for shipping is not just around logistics and the delivery, but it's also around sustainability. So to wrap up the Q&A session between you and me, I would love to actually ask you, what is your prediction for what a state-of-art, top-notch e-commerce experience is going to look like for consumers in 3 to 5 years' time? And what should fashion companies be doing now in terms of being able to future-proof?
I'll start with the second part of your question. What should fashion companies be doing now in order to future-proof? As you mentioned, the supply chain is now a boardroom conversation. It's an incredibly important strategic differentiator. Brands have invested decades and years, and depending on their maturity, in building out their product and designing the best version of their product. How does that product go from the place of manufacture to the consumer at the best possible way is going to be an incredibly critical aspect. The way I see it is more and more collaborative data ecosystems. What's happening today is all of this information is sitting in silos, locked within data ecosystems of different players in this supply chain, in this entire fashion supply chain. How could we move to a place where there is collaborative joint data platforms, where there's place for everyone to compete, but we are making the most responsible, most optimal, and best experience choices for our consumers, for collective success, whoever you are in the fashion ecosystem. Designer, you're a manufacturer, you're a brand, you're a supply chain service provider, or you're a consumer who at the end of the day is making responsible choices. That is one of the key differentiators is going to be these joint data platforms that help make collective decisions that's responsible, that respects privacy, but makes this optimal. One of the biggest reasons for the disruption we saw over the last 2-3 years during the pandemic was the lack of this joint data ecosystem. How many of you saw the news that, on one end of the planet, there was food being thrown away because supply chains got disrupted, and then the other end of the planet, there were people standing outside food banks waiting to get a little bit of food. But if the data was in a collective ecosystem, matching demand to supply in the most optimal way, would have been far more possible than it is today. And I just want to go back to what Dan Shirley said, right? I mean, supply chain is something we really care about, and we care about because I think from the dawn of mankind, from the Silk Road to today, supply chain has been one of the greatest enablers of human civilization. We're thinking different. We're not saying this is our silo, this is your silo. How can we make our network an extension of your product through data, insights, and the physical infrastructure to help brands be successful? And we're being pretty ambitious. We want to change the way consumers have access to their favorite brands and the experience that they get in the direct-to-consumer channels of these brands, but do it in a very responsible manner to the environment and to the planet that we live in. So I think we're checking all three boxes as per Dane Shelley, which is we're doing something we care about, trying to do it different, and thinking big enough.
Well, thank you. It's companies like ShopRunner that are able to help improve our industry and our planet at large. Thank you again, Sriram, for joining us today.